Okay, we want to make sure that we're getting live onto Facebook. And I think we are live now. Yes, cool. All right, let's record this. Oops, ready to go. All right, hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Callahan. I am the founder of the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group, and I also have an amazing program called Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, where I help women to identify their invisible emotional relationship with food through taking a journey of self-discovery. This was my story and how I fixed my emotional eating habits from the inside out. So today we are going to be talking about how to break the cycle of overeating. Now, I did some research on this and I looked all over the web for different ways to break the cycle of overeating. And what I found over and over and over again were things that allowed you to take action steps to change what it was that you were doing. I saw things like distract yourself, put a piece of gum in your mouth, make certain that you stay focused on your eating with mindfulness, make certain that you ask for help, like go get therapy or counseling or something like that. And so it's interesting because everything that I saw on there really was tied into the overeating part of the word in this sentence. So the sentence is how to break the cycle of overeating. Now, everything that I researched, everything that I looked up was always focused on the overeating part. Like, how do I stop myself from overeating? And I understand that if we're just focusing on the overeating, what happens is that we actually will start to get more attention or give more attention to the very thing that we don't want. And so we will get more of what we focus on. And so if we focus on the overeating part, then we'll get more overeating. And so it's kind of like that thing where if you're I don't know, we've been watching the Olympics lately, skiing down the path and there's trees in the way. It's like, are you going to look at the trees or are you going to focus on the clear path? And so when we focus on the overeating part of the sentence, it makes us assume that overeating is like the norm and that we just have to figure out ways to break that habit because overeating is what we will always have. So now we just have to figure out how to break the habit of it. But it doesn't give any voice to the fact that overeating is not really the norm. It's not really a thing. And if you take ownership of having a problem with overeating, then basically that is your definition of yourself. And it's just like, well, I'm always going to have this. And now I just got to break that habit. But it doesn't allow you to remove the habit from your being to begin with. It kind of gives it a voice. Like when you were born, you were stamped on your forehead with overeater. And that's just who you'll always be. And so now you're going to break that habit. But you still have to wear the overeating coat, meaning that that's just who you are. That's what makes you up. That's who you're supposed to be. And now you just want to break the habit. And so I don't like that. It doesn't feel good to me. And I want to feel good. So because I want to feel good, I want you to feel good too. Now, for decades and decades, I would have been curious about what this whole breaking the cycle with overeating was as well, because I was constantly overeating. And in between, of course, my dieting, which was the opposite of overeating to me, which basically meant that I starved myself. So to me, it was the all or nothing. I was either overeating or I was undereating. And I don't know how this is relating to what you feel, but if you're here in this community or you're watching this video on YouTube or something, you're clearly having some disconnect with wanting to be able to stop overeating. So we have to be able to understand this from a different angle, because if we just look at the overeating part, we are going to miss a ginormous opportunity to explore the other two words in the sentence, the other meaningful words in the sentence anyways, which is break and cycle. So when I looked up the word break, and I encourage you to do this anytime and every time that you're trying to do something, because what happens is sometimes, again, we focus on the very thing that we don't want, and we miss an opportunity to focus on the very thing that we do want. So I want that cycle to shift. That's what I want. That's what I want for you. So I think the word cycle to me is the most important word in the sentence. And so that's what I'm going to research. That's what I'm going to look up. However, I also want to understand what the word break means. And so when I looked up the word break, it means to separate or cause a separation into pieces as a result of a block, shock, or strain. So when I think about like breaking this cycle, it feels like I have to like plow through it. Like it's going to be something intense and it's going to be something that's almost stressful, which doesn't feel good to me. Actually, I don't know how stress feels to you, but to me, I feel like I'd rather have peace and love and joy and kindness and happiness. So for me, right off the bat, when I think about like breaking this cycle, it sounds pretty intimidating. So I want to be able to focus more on the word that I feel is going to get us the best results. And that's the word cycle. So if we look at the word cycle, it means a series of events that happen in a certain order. Okay, that's fair enough, right? We do have a cycle that is a leader, like leading certain events towards the overeating, right? And so if we kind of think about it that way, and we kind of think about like, okay, overeating is not really the problem, it's just the symptom, it's like what we're getting. And, the cycle of how we get there, well, let's check out, like, let's see what that is. And so for me, the cycle went a little bit like this. Number one, I had to continue my negative thinking patterns about myself, because if I really thought that, everything was okay, I didn't have to change anything, I enjoyed the way I looked, I felt really good about myself, like if I felt all of those things about myself, well, then chances are more than not I wouldn't have been dieting so severely. And if I wasn't having to feel like I had a diet so severely because I didn't like what I looked like, then it probably wouldn't have led me to the opposite extreme, which was the overeating, right? Because for me, it was like one or the other. So the cycle started with me inside of my mind. It started with how I looked at myself as a human being. It started with pushing myself to the back burner quite often, to making certain that everything else got taken care of, and then I kind of fell to the back. It also involved, for me, it involved a series of very intense kind of like punishments, where again I was either binge eating or maybe I was over exercising and beating myself up emotionally and mentally, telling myself how stupid I was and how ridiculous it was that I couldn't stick to a diet. And so there was a lot of mental anguish that came inside of this cycle. Now, the next part of the cycle for me was that I would guilt and shame myself for the overeating part. So the overeating was just like, it was just like a part of my ship. It really wasn't the thing that I was trying to get away from. It was actually embedded in the space that I had created for myself within the cycle. So the overeating just kind of gave me an ability to be able to shame and blame and guilt myself and be full of regrets. Now, I got this piece of the puzzle in other ways too. There was times that I would have conversations with people where I would later on go back and go like, oh no, like, did I really say that? Or maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I'm not sure. There was ways that I got there through maybe disorganization. Maybe I'd lose my keys, or I'd forget something, or, I was late somewhere, or maybe I was, so worried about being on time that I stressed myself out about it. And I lived in somewhat of a perfectionism bubble. And so that was part of the cycle also. And last part of the cycle for me was really just to, if I ever felt like the cycle was breaking in some way, like I ever did feel a little calmer about things, or I did do what I would consider to be the right thing, I would self-sabotage. So it felt very, confusing to me, because there was parts that I would get, away from the cycle. And I kind of felt like, wow, like I'm doing pretty good. And then maybe, I don't know, I'd weigh myself. Maybe I'd be like, wow, look at me, I lost 5 pounds. That's super cool. And then the next thing you know, wham, it was like I pulled the rug out from under myself. And that is where I would completely disconnect and unravel. and spiral out of control. And then I'd be right back where I started. So it's interesting that the cycle of overeating for me had so many different elements to it, because it always stimulated my mindset to take me back to that overeating. It was the easiest way for me to get to the yucky feelings about myself, the places where I didn't feel good about myself. Now, in self-discovery, I have learned that there really are no yucky feelings, that each feeling is meant to be felt, and each feeling allows us to connect with ourselves on a deeper level and to be human. But at the time, I didn't realize that. And so I just kept using the overeating as part of my game plan, like part of my larger picture of how I continue to allow myself to second guess myself, to judge and shame and blame myself, and to question everything that I did as being right or wrong, and how I held myself to a certain expectation, which led me to a really huge problem with perfectionism, with really like thinking that like I had to do it right, or I was always going to do it wrong. And so if you can relate to any of this, I want you to start to clear out your mindset for the overeating being the problem. And as you're thinking about breaking the cycle of overeating, I want you to step away from the overeating part. I want you to smooth out the break part. And I want you to concentrate on your cycle. What is your cycle? What do you do to get you into that place inside of your mind where now you are like beating yourself up and you're like, why did I do this? What's wrong with me? How did I end up here again? Also, what's part of the cycle? What part of the cycle do you clear it in your head where you're like, yes, I'm on the right track. I'm doing great. I've been feeling so great about myself. I'm on this, diet plan, and like I'm doing the right thing, and I'm feeling, super energized. I'm drinking these shakes and bars and pills and all the things. Like what part of the cycle does that hold for you, where you kind of have that like false sense of superiority, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to stay this way forever. But then it's not sustainable because, hello, you're a human being. So there are going to be things that are going to get in the way of that perfection, that perfect diet. Like you're going to go on a vacation and you're going to want a burger and you're going to go to someone's house. I just went for Super Bowl the other day and I had a brownie, I had chocolate, I had different things that I normally don't put in my regular diet. Like those aren't things that I eat every day. And yet on that day, I had them. And so that's okay. It didn't cause me to like flip out and be like, oh my gosh, I have to go on a cleanse or do something like I used to do. See, that was part of my cycle. Back in the day, I would do something like that, like I'm sharing about, the Super Bowl. And it'd be like, well, I already messed up. Might as well just eat neat. And then it would take me several days, if not weeks, to get back on my good cycle. And then wham, I was like on and off. And so this torment, this torture, this bullying, honestly, it's really bullying because it causes you to treat yourself badly, to put such constraints on yourself that you can't do the best for yourself. You don't end up showing up as the best version of yourself for yourself because you're so busy either, putting yourself into such a perfect space that you have to do everything right, or you're busy self-sabotaging to tell yourself why you've now chosen to do everything wrong. And so let's talk a little bit more about the cycle and what that means and what is your order of events. So I want you to think about this. Write this down on your piece of paper. You can write, what is my cycle? And you can put of overeating, that's fine. You can leave it in the equation. I just don't want it to be the focus, because what we think, and we have thought this for decades, is that if we break the cycle of overeating, like if we go on the diet plan, if we do the Whole30, or we stay on this thing for, months at a time, or I was on isogenics for literally 4 years, seriously, 4 years. I just kept going back on it over and over again because I was like, as long as I'm drinking those 2 shakes and eating these bars and taking these pills, like everything will be okay. But the truth is nothing was okay, because at the end of it, what that allowed me to do was that allowed me to keep building a lack of trust with myself. It was like that was part of the cycle, because if I couldn't figure out how to decide for myself why I was on this cycle to begin with, then all of those plans to stop overeating, they just allowed me to stay stuck in the cycle of lack of trust, feeling guilt and shame, feeling regret, feeling confusion and frustration. And so not being able to see the cycle that I was in, I just looked at it as the overeating part. And if I could just not overeat, then I felt like I had broken the cycle, but that wasn't true. So think about what your cycle is, right? Think, what is your cycle? How do I get from A to B to C? Like, what is the process? What keeps happening over and over again? Some people look at it as a hamster wheel. Like, what's the parts of the roller coaster ride? Like, think about it however you want to think about it, but just see what keeps happening over and over again, and write it out in a very systematic manner with very few words. Use an economy of words. So A, this happens. B, this happens. C, this happens. Go small, chunk it, small little pieces, so that you can really zoom out and be able to see the bigger picture. Look, once you kind of see what the cycle is, then take each component of the cycle and see what habits have you created within that cycle. Like for me, for example, one of the habits that I would do was I would like research online about what diet plans I could go on, right? Or I would talk to friends and be like, hey, what are you doing? And I would get really interested when somebody told me that they were like on a new plan, like keto, like paleo, like whatever, doctor's quick weight loss, whatever it was. And then it'd be like, oh, and then my mind immediately switched into, that's the answer. So that was part of my cycle. And what I had to do to break that cycle was I had to tell myself, oh, no, that's not okay to look at someone else's way of doing something as being the best way for me. I have to build trust with myself. And so as soon as I saw myself going into that cycle where I thought to myself, like, this is the answer, I had to back myself down and say, no, Lisa, that is not the answer. The answers live inside of you. That was part of my cycle. So once you can figure out like what habits within each part of your cycle are you using to get even better at staying stuck, right? Because if I continued to get better at that, meaning going on a diet to fix my emotional eating habits, what I would effectively do is I would continue to get better and better at staying stuck and not trusting myself and not understanding the root cause of the problem. And so I was getting better at something that was actually meant to hurt me. And that's a piece of self-discovery that is the most important piece, really, because it allows you to get out of your own way. So again, breaking down the habits that allow you to get really good at staying stuck. So kind of piece that together. List out 3 cycles that you have that inevitably lead you to overeat. So kind of try and see, like, for me, one of the things that I would do is I would leave the house for hours without having some kind of food with me. Like, and then, so what I would do then is I would convince myself that I had to stop somewhere, and it was always a health food store. Like, that was the thing. Always. It's always health, Whole Foods, Fresh Market, like somewhere really good, where I could get organic food. And as I was pulling in there, like, I knew what I was going to do. I knew it. And I would go in telling myself, like convincing myself that I was going to go in and get some healthful thing, not even to eat then, but maybe to eat later. And inevitably, no matter what I did, every single time, I would leave the store. As I was at the cash register, I was already like opening a wrapper of some kind, like barely paying for the thing. Sometimes even like taking food from those little bins and like stealing them and walking around the store while I was eating them, because I was starving. I was hungry. And so going into that situation with a mindset of saying to myself, I'm going to do one thing, knowing full and well underneath, I'm going to do another thing, period, end of story. And then kind of omitting, like as if like I took that chunk out of my head and brought it to the side. And I couldn't figure out why I was doing that. And so really see it outside of yourself. Try and like watch yourself as if you were in a movie, really like kind of knowing this part is like, oh, that's the part where the girl's gonna get out of the car. She's gonna walk over to the candy machine. She's gonna pull that. That's the part. Yep, I know that part, right? See what your repeats are. And then and list out 3 things. And then, like I said, reverse engineer. So if we were able to rewind the tape, right? You're watching this from a overview. If you were going to rewind the tape and be like, stop on that part, like for me, it would have been like, go home. Just go home and eat something, right? If I'm hungry, why am I going into a supermarket? I have to still buy the food, take it into my car, go home, right? I like going home was the end result. So why didn't I just go there? I didn't go there because I didn't have any sugary sweet foods at home. See, I felt like I couldn't trust myself. So I never kept any sugary sweet foods in my house, in my home, right? So I had to go to the store to get the sugary sweet foods. And so that's how I tricked myself. And if you're doing this, trust me, I get it. And yet at the same time, again, your problem is not overeating. Your problem is figuring out that cycle, reverse engineering it, being able to take a pause and go like, okay, wait a minute, that's what I need to focus on, right? And so the other thing I want you to do is I want you to think on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is this cycle interfering with your life? Like that's an important piece of the puzzle, because if you're just like, whatever, doesn't really matter, then you won't ever want to do anything about it. See, for me, that allowed me to continue to build a lack of trust with myself. Lacking trust with myself was a huge part of my life, and it caused me to lie. It caused me to fabricate stories. It caused me to hurt people. Like it wasn't a good part of me. It certainly wasn't the beaming, proud parts of me. And because I was doing that, I had to be able to reverse engineer and see like, well, where am I getting good at lying? Where am I getting good at not trusting? Right. And so that was all part of it. So as you see, we're talking about something much larger than just overeating, right? And that's what self-discovery allows us to do. I also want you to, so scale of 1 to 10, how much is this interfering with my life? What would the best version of me like to do? Right? So a lot of times we give the best version of ourselves to other people, and we show ourselves the worst version of ourselves. And so what would my 100% look like? Like if I applied all of my attention to figuring out the cycle, right? This isn't rocket science, but it's also not obvious. It's invisible. It really is. And when I fixed this emotional eating habit for myself, I really had to reverse engineer. I had to figure it out. I had to go backwards. And honestly, I had to have help. I did. So think about also, let's see, which questions do you feel that are unanswered? Like, let's say just write out about a list of maybe 3 or 4 questions and say, like, if I could just know the answer to why I choose to eat cookies in the car, like I would feel like I had a solution to some of my problem, right? I don't know. Just give yourself some question marks. Everybody's life is different. Everybody has different habits. Everybody has a different cycle. Everybody has a different reason for why they want to break the cycle. And the first step of this really is just getting curious and being able to observe yourself through a wider lens, like literally zoom out, see yourself as being like a television show, almost like where you're kind of watching it. And because you're watching it from the outside, you can kind of see what's going on through a different lens, through a different angle, right? And also, if you want help, that is what I'm here for. So you'll reach out and contact me. There'll be some links around the post here that you can either book a call or fill out a form to see if you do qualify for a call, if we would be the right fit to work together to begin with. Because if we're not, then I can help you to be able to find a coach that might be able to help you better than I, but that form is a really good way to find out. So, all right, I hope that you enjoyed this training, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.